With AEW fans encouraged to move on from the all-out brawl and more, this is Wrestling Hub. My name is John, and you're watching the Wrestling Report. Before we get into the rest of the video, make sure you subscribe to Wrestling Hub and turn on all notifications to stay up to date with everything in the world of pro wrestling. Also, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Wrestling Hub Official and follow us on Twitter at Wrestling_Hub. Touching on Renee Paquette being with AEW, commentator for the company Tony Schiavone said on his podcast, "She's wonderful. She's such a pro. She is so good on camera at what she does, and it prevents me from running backstage 100 times now too. I'm just really thrilled about us having her, and hopefully we use her more. I know she did some commentary for WWE back then, and she was really in a tough spot. She was the third person. A three-man booth is not easy, and then adding a fourth, as we do on Rampage, is even harder. So I thought she was in a tough spot there. She's just so great to work with. She looks so great on camera. She's so cool. One of our best hires in a long time. Really is." Speaking about Jeff Jarrett's AEW debut, Jim Cornette spoke about him being able to draw money for the company, saying, "Punk returned. I'll give each man their proper respects. CM Punk didn't grow up in the wrestling business and start his own promotion multiple times, but Jeff has never been in a position as a money draw talent like CM Punk was. So Punk came and did bring pay-per-view buys and ratings, and they still couldn't get closer to WWE. Jeff Jarrett is not going to bring the numbers in those categories as Punk did as a wrestler." Of course, AEW President Tony Khan explained that Jarrett was hired for his experience in promoting pro wrestling on an international level and his expertise in regards to live events. As it looks like longtime NWA World Champion Nick Aldis is done with the promotion, the NWA has now issued a statement on the matter, writing, "Pursuant to the recent comments made by Nick Aldis, the National Wrestling Alliance has suspended Aldis from the main roster, and effective immediately, Aldis will not appear for the Hard Times 3 pay-per-view and Revolution Rumble television tapings in New Orleans on November 12, 2022 and November 13th. As such, the NWA reserves its right to comment on this matter at a future date." Aldis would respond on Twitter as he wrote, "Sorry to disappoint, but I was removed from the shows this weekend after giving my notice. I fully intended to fulfill my obligations to the audience, but unfortunately, the company doesn't seem to share the same values." Taking to Twitter, Nature Boy Ric Flair took a shot at WWE over the hypocrisy of the company having inducted JBL into their Hall of Fame. "I guess the anti-bullying program you so heavily endorsed does not apply to Bradshaw, Jason Roberts, and Joey Styles. What a joke. And he's in the Hall of Fame. Sad." When it comes to a rumor that WWE considered bringing in an AEW star for their 2022 Royal Rumble when Mickie James returned as Impact Knockouts champion, Louis Dangoor would clarify, noting that it was never on the table for it to be anybody from AEW. That I know for sure. They agreed to have Mickie James wearing the Impact title, so I know the idea was, if we do it in the women's, should we do it in the men's? From what I understand, a list of 4 or 5 guys was presented, and Vince didn't like any of them, so that's where it ended. Vince doesn't know every single wrestler outside of WWE, so when this list was presented, there was nothing that jumped out at him. I'm not even quite sure he recognized the 4 or 5 or 6 guys that they said, "We can probably do this." With Natalya recently having her nose reset after her injury from SmackDown last week, she will apparently be out of action, as Steve Carey of Ringside News said, "We have an injury update on Natalya. Her nose needed to be reset, but no bones were broken. Still, she could be out of action for 3 or 4 months. When it comes to the previous feud between Seth Rollins and Matt Riddle, it seems following Raw that this rivalry is no more, with it noted on Wrestling Observer Radio, so Seth and Lashley will be the program for the title, and poor Riddle, the guy who is facing. I don't know what's going to happen to Riddle. I guess Seth and Riddle is done. Speaking of Ryan Satin on Out of Character, Butch would reveal how grateful he is to have Triple H back working in WWE following his health scare. Yeah, it's great. He's a great boss to work for. There's no bad things I want to say. I love the time under him in NXT. NXT UK was a blast. He's always been great with me, super approachable. To be honest, I was just really happy to see him back in any capacity, obviously when he came back from his troubles. That whole UK tournament and all that, the trust that he put into me to do that, to that point, he probably seen me have one tryout match. He probably had watched footage of me separately, but I hadn't even met him until the press conference, which was a few weeks before the UK tournament, and I've never worked with him until the UK tournament, and he had full trust in me to go out there and have 3 or 4 matches that weekend to be sort of the ongoing story throughout that weekend, and to sort of build the UK title around it. Butch would also touch on the prospect of NXT Europe. A huge reason being, I get to go home, but also I owe so much to the British/European scene. We were so lucky to have such a good group of us all around going under the radar for a decade until it all started to blow up. To have that experience, going out there and doing those shows under the radar, making every mistake and tweaking them and fixing them ourselves, and having like-minded people around, I'm so grateful for that time in my career. We were doing good stuff, but we still weren't good yet. When comparing his run on NXT to the main roster, he said, there was a whole group of us that were flying in for a chance at a big company after wrestling for 10 plus years on the independents. Most of us already had a bond with each other. You could almost live takeover to takeover. The week of TV was great, but people knew you could just tune in for takeover and see those one-off great matches 4 to 5 times a year. So everything built to that, everything was built around that. And it wasn't so much of a variety show as the main roster can be. Also, it wasn't catered to that big of an audience, though it was still very big, right? It was still very niche, and all of us had that bond backstage. So it's hard to compare it to what NXT was, or even what NXT is now. Staying on the topic of NXT Europe, Chief of Content for WWE Triple H would explain his plans for the brand expansion during the Q3 earnings call, saying, when we started NXT UK, the desire was to sort of replicate what we were doing in the US, and we got a start on it, and then COVID hit and slowed everything down, and then we needed to rethink it. So we got to a place where we were ready to go again, but it's sort of tough to rebrand something and reboot it while you're still running it, so we shut it down. As Europe evolves and grows, once we bring that back, I think we will begin to see it replicating a bit more of what you see in the US. It's very difficult for us to find athletes, bring them to the US to begin training. It's a very long process for us. We can get them into Europe in a much quicker fashion and get them training much quicker, much faster, and have success in a shorter period of time. So it becomes a very key hub for us. I think once Europe is established, you will see us begin to look at branching that out into other markets as well. With him recently being cut from NXT along with a few other stars, Bodhi Hayward touched on the opportunity he had in WWE, telling 10 Count, every time I look back from football to wrestling, I think, alright Brady, we got really close to what we wanted, the NFL, the main roster. I feel that maybe WWE want me to create my own following. Maybe they want me to become my own star. So if that's what I have to do, I can show that I can do all those things from guys like Andre Chase helping me out. I want to say that I can't thank him enough. I love him for letting me be able to do that, and unfortunately out of left field it was cut short. Speaking about his role as a producer for AEW, Ariya Daivari mentioned how he learned from his brother Sean in WWE, saying, "So while I was in WWE, I was always thinking about different ideas and watching people's matches very closely, and I knew producing was something I eventually wanted to do. Sean became a producer at WWE, so I started talking to him more and more about the process. Eventually I started doing it as a trial run there as well too before I started with AEW. So a producer here in AEW is sometimes almost like reigning talent just a little bit for their own good. We've got some wild, crazy guys and girls that are so dedicated to this business that if you don't rein them back a little bit, they're going to go out there and potentially kill themselves for the love of the business. Being a producer, you sometimes want to help instill the psychology, making sure some of the old school rules live on while still adding a new school flavor to it." On the AEW Unrestricted podcast, he touched on his team on AEW Dark. If some people remember, on a few episodes of AEW Dark, I was wrestling with another guy named and Invictus Cash. Very good wrestler. He's a fellow Persian man, just like me. We kind of got put together randomly as a tag team, and we were doing a couple darks together, and it was going great. Tony shows up later, and I kind of talked to him a little bit, and he just lays this whole idea on the line for me of the Trust Busters and Parker Bordeaux. And he has ideas for other members, which turned out to be Sonny Kiss and BSK, and it all just kind of happened one day. During an interview with PW Mania, Al Snow had this to say about the drama surrounding the brawl from All Out between CM Punk and the Elite, as he said, "Why do you keep picking at the scab? Why do you keep acknowledging it? Why do you not just shift focus and then now try to focus on the now? Because it's all about what you're selling. Instead of continuing to pay attention to it and draw attention to it, forget about it. Move on. Shit happens. You do that in your own life. You literally do it in your own life. You either dwell on something and hold on to it and focus all about it, and you can't do anything to change it. It's happened. What are we going to do?" And this was your pro wrestling news update. I hope you're all having a great day. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later.